maintenance.
Yep.
Well, let's go ahead and let's get into our final architecture we want to discuss, which is the service-oriented architecture.
Yeah, so with service-oriented, or you'll hear messaging, that's that's going to come up when talking about service-oriented.
Right.
So what you'll have is the same approach with the microservices where you have these UI pieces, whether it's a mobile app or a web application, and instead of going through an API gateway, they'll still go through that most likely, but instead of going to a microservice itself, it's going to go in the service bus.
Right.
So
right.
a thing that's called the enterprise service bus.
Mm-hmm.
And within that, based on your request types and your message that you're sending through, it tells it where to go. So it'll send it to a provider. And that can be like an account service, an order service, or a shipping service.
Right, right.
And then from there, it'll do the logic to that piece, whatever it needs to.
Right, whatever. If it's meant for saving, it's going to take that message and it's going to save your shipping information.
Right.
But it's all part of a messaging centric architecture that. On the UI side, very simple. You fill out the information, you gather all the information that you need about shipping, and you push the button to save, and it configures a message, and it just sends it.
Yep.
And there's no processing, there's no wait time for a response back from the service. It just sends that message out to the bus, and that bus eventually gets that message, and it processes it and saves it. And that's where they start using these phrases of eventual consistency.
Yep.
And if you want to go further into that, let's go ahead and let's do that.
Yeah, I mean it'll go into it'll send it to a queue and it'll go in order from that queue, whatever was first and first out, right? So it goes in, comes out, and you may have a huge system, so that's where these architecture patterns that like service oriented, like microservices come into play, because you have so much communication going through.
Right.
And on the UI, not everything needs a response. So something like a payment, maybe you don't need to know if that failed or succeeded right away. You're just going to be processing. And you can process for, however long. It won't usually take that long, because to go through the queue, based on how big your service is. It's probably not going to take too long, but it's also, you don't want to bog down the UI. So waiting for it.
And these messages, they're usually, when they're sent to the bus, they're usually processed within milliseconds or seconds. We're not talking minutes or 10 minutes or anything like that. These service bus architectures, they're pretty fast, and they process this stuff really quick. So and another really good advantage to this is that when you think of your web server and you think of your services that are on another server somewhere within your cloud, the processing load that you have on your web service is greatly reduced. Everything is quicker. All of that gigantic bloated server that handles everything, whether it's your database, your web server, your microservices, you can just stick your site on a web server, and processing is faster. Page loads are faster because it's not churning through, waiting for a response or anything. It just makes everything faster. So. It's a very highly used architecture at an enterprise level. You won't really see a medium or small size business use this type of pattern, although they could. But you normally see these in a big enterprise systems.
And again, that kind of goes back to what we talked about. Microservices being a con to it is cost and resource heavy. So these like enterprise service bus, we used in-service bus and RabbitMQ. Not necessarily the cheapest things out there, right? So you have to kind of have an organization that's big enough and needs it, right? You don't want to just do it because everybody else is doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So at smaller projects and companies, you may not see this.
Right, right, and you can even use Azure Service Bus, or you can
Yeah,
use Event Grid.
yeah,
You know,
yeah. Now,
but let's talk a little bit about the types of messages too, because I don't think we really talked about that, and we don't need to go in too much detail. But normally there's two types of messages. You either have a command, which is something that a message tells a service to do,
right,
you know, and then you have an event, which signifies that something has happened,
right,
and something has changed.
right,
So those type of messages are the more or less standard of
right,
a service oriented architecture. I don't think you'll see any other type of messages. You're just really, you know, concerning
right.
yourself with commands and events.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and what an event will do is when it comes through, you know, a command, you're kind of doing stuff to that. But when an event is published, it's like, hey, I paid this, let's send out this event. And a
mhm.
couple services might be reading for that.
Right, or
Maybe
listening,
yeah,
yeah.
reading. But yeah, listening for that event, and they'll be like, oh, this was paid, so I need to do my command, or
Right,
I need to do my logic
right,
that
right.
says when I hear that, I do
Right,
this.
or you could go back a little bit. You can go back a step where if you're going through a credit card processing, you know, you purchase something online, and you're at the payment
Mhm.
side of the process, and your credit card information is inputted. You've saved it, and an event goes off and says, okay, this charge has been approved on your card,
Right.
so the charge has been executed. Now the event publishes a message out to the shipping to start the shipping
Right.
part. You
Yep.
know,
And
so
email service. Maybe
email
it
service.
sends an
Yep.
email to the
Yep.
end user. I know
Yep.
Amazon does that
Oh yeah.
because I
Yeah.
always get one when it's approved.
Right.
So,
Right.
and when it's shipping, they also do the
Yeah. This
email.
is some good fun stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
talking about these architectures, it's really fun. And as a developer, you know, you can't go wrong getting into either one of these three architectures. It's you know, these are widely accepted.
Yep.
They're very popular and widely used.
Right, and that's why we wanted to touch on these three and kind of look at your organization and if you need to move into one, if it's time to grow. Whether it's in tier, if you're not at an in tier, it's probably time to turn into an in tier.
Yeah. Yeah.
But even from an in tier to turning into a microservice or service oriented
Hmm.
pattern.
Right.
And then select the one that's for you, or I've seen hybrids
Right.
of both.
Yeah.
So
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
you can kind of, it's based on your needs of your organization.
Yeah, you usually tend to
So,
see, you know, interior architecture starting to come into play when you've got a company that's small and they're transitioning from small to mid-sized companies. Then you need to start thinking about, you know, an interior architecture and you know, going in that direction. And then as you start to grow close to enterprise level, you know, then it's really time to start
right,
thinking about microservices and
right.
SOA. You know,
Yeah.
so it all depends on your growth and the type of business you have, and you know, just fun
Yeah.
stuff to consider. Your developers that are on your team, you know, they're gonna love it. You know, most developers love a challenge. You know,
Yeah,
and
no, I definitely liked it when I went into you know, distributed system stuff.
yes,
I
yeah,
I liked it.
hmm
Enjoyed doing it. I'm not doing it currently. I'm on a little smaller projects.
yeah, yeah.
But I'd love to get back into it at some point in
All
my
right.
career.